It was Sunday. That was fun. Oh my God. Profitable day. Um, Not hugely, but picked up about 25% of my buy-ins. So make your money back plus 25% every day. Do pretty well. Disappointing end. Went out 16th in a big one. Just kind of, coolered, whatever. Two outa. Mm. But anyway, so let's go through the hands and then we'll jump into the next section for the wake up with me. I like that on some play days I'm not going to do the wake up with me's every time. I think that that's better for making sure I get started early enough. So be aware that there won't be wake up with me's on Saturday and Sunday anymore. I don't think it really matters. I think I'm putting out a good amount of content. I'm also going to start changing up the YouTube stuff a lot. There's going to be some vlogging and such, but it's a lot of work. All right, ace queen. See raise. I decided to just call on the button. This player had been opening a lot of hands, so rather than take the aggressive line, I decided to call. I was also looking for one of these players behind to squeeze, and then I could jam over the top. Didn't happen though. We go to the flop. I make the ace. Player does bet 350. Half pot doesn't usually mean much. I mean, he could definitely have me beat, but I don't think I can fold as played. I have the queen, which is great, but it doesn't really change my hand that much. My opponent can definitely have hands like king queen now, which is awesome, but it's rare. It's just as rare as ace king, so it's kind of whatever. Also, if he keeps betting with any kind of solid meaning, I could definitely be beat here, because is he going to go 3 streets with ace jack? I kind of doubt it. Player bets 2/3 pot now. This kind of makes me feel better because it's shaping up like a bet, which means I should be able to beat it. I do call. The river comes off the 6 of hearts. Not really worried about the backdoor flush draw, because unless he has exactly the suited ace, there's really no flushes that get here. And I really felt like he was stronger than that pre-flop. So he goes ahead and jam-a-lambs. And I don't know what's going on here. So I just fold. I feel like this is one where I ended up with a very strong hand that was not good enough. It's just his betting, like he was setting up the bet, and I saw it, but I just felt like I was up against 2 pair a ton here. I honestly don't know why. This is one I kind of wanted to run the numbers on it, and I'm probably supposed to go broke here. Like, I'm probably just supposed to make the call, and if he's got ace king, it's too bad. But, the ace of hearts is missing, from my view. So he's raising. He's going to have a lot of aces. I don't think somebody's going to barrel here without an ace. So let's give him credit for an ace. That means the ace of hearts is out there. And since the king and the queen are on the board, the ace jack suited is pretty likely. A lot of players will raise any suited ace on the button. I mean, or on the cutoff. I definitely do. I just think this is one where he flopped me almost dead. I think I needed running queens here. And I do think some of the time that isn't even good enough. So this is one that looked like a total 3-bet that I couldn't explain why, but I didn't like it. And I should love this spot. And it was early in the tournament. I could totally re-enter. Like, we weren't deep. But something about this one. And I just kind of wanted to recognize it and say, sometimes you don't have an explanation, and I think you should still go with your gut. King 9. Oh, this is later in the tournament, right? We're kind of deep at this point. Why are these out of order? Yeah. Oh, this is because this one, you only started out with 5,000 chips. So we're kind of deep. This is a perfect jam spot. I just wanted to illustrate it, and it gets the fold. And this winning is huge, because this is, 7 blinds added to my 26 big blind stack. It kind of takes me to the next level of play here at 33 blinds. So now I have a lot more maneuverability. Let's see here. 5-8. See a raise out of second and a call on the bubble, or on the button. I decided to call this one. We are all super deep very early in the start of this tournament. This is a progressive knockout. We see a raise here. This raise is not enough. This raise should be something like, because he's out of position, it should be something like 13 to 15 blinds. I know that sounds excessive, but this is barely a pot-sized bet. It's like 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Yeah, this is just under a pot-sized bet. So you would want to go 12 here just to make it pot, and you're out of position. You're going to want to go bigger. So if I'm legitimately 3-betting here, especially with the stacks as deep as they are, I'm going 15. Like, I'm not even going to click around the buttons. I'm literally just going to type in 15 and put that up there. So it seems kind of weird. Obviously, it's not going to work like he plans. He gets called twice, which obviously prices me in. It cost me 8 blinds to win 33. So we can obviously call all day, getting 4-1. Make the 8, not the worst. Goes check. He now bets 1/3 pot. This is never the bet you're supposed to make here. This is one where the 3-better preflop would have no range advantage on this board. Meaning, you know, his hands like ace king, ace queen, you know, things like that wouldn't do well unless they're exactly over pairs. And in that case, he should be betting bigger. But this is a low frequency board for him, so betting smaller makes sense if you're just going to bet more often here. He's not going to bet more often here. So if the board was like queen, 5, and 4, right? Then he could bet this small and get folds. And also, he could bet this small and people wouldn't know whether or not he had a queen. You know what I'm saying? It would look very reasonable that he could have a queen. He could have ace queen. He could have king queen. He could have all those hands. But this board doesn't hit that range. So why are you betting? You're representing nothing here. An overpair should be betting much bigger. An overpair should be betting at least half pot, probably more, because this is a super draw heavy board. If you're sitting here with a pair of queens, man, you're betting like 22 to 25 blinds. This is ridiculous. So this bet is just nothing. This is a weak nothing bet. So of course I call it. The 4 comes off on the turn. It goes check, check. What a shock. River comes off an 8. And I decide to make the bad bet bluff. I thought about overbetting this one, but I thought maybe there's a small chance that he has a pair in his hand and will call. So I went with, this is my other choice here, is to do this or bet really small. I felt like betting really small, though. He would just snap call with some kind of pair, so I wanted to take a chance to get raised. He does call me, and I like that I made the bigger bet. And my man had pocket aces. How poorly did you play this, sir? How poorly did you play this? So, yeah. And if he just bets big on the flop, right, and then I check to him on the turn, he can just bet moderately on the turn, and I have to fold. Like, yeah, you don't know if I have a flush, but if you're going to be afraid of that, just fold the aces pre-flop, bro. You did everything wrong. You see a raise. There is no small blinds, so this is kind of interesting. Short-handed. I flop the flush draw. It goes check, check. I decide to bet 1/3 pot. I can have all of this range. My opponents really can't because nobody bets the flop. So we just take it down. Good to note, you can win pots without having anything and just equity. I just wanted to point that out. I think people only I got a couple complaints that people are saying, like, you're only showing the hands where you win in showdown. And it's like, okay, first of all, that's not true. And second of all, that's because there's more to tell. You know what I'm saying? Like, but little steals on the flop, good to acknowledge. I raise from the small blind, 3.5 standard. Flop comes off 10, 6, 7. This is one that doesn't hit my frequencies well, right? Like, there's no big cards on this board. But I decided to go ahead and bet it, and I didn't bet it quite as big as I normally would because the board is so bad. So I kind of backed this off a little bit. Looking back, I would have liked to have bet like half a big blind more, but this is fine. We get called. King on the turn is pretty damn good for me. I decide to keep the story going that I have nothing and bet about 2/3 pot. We see a call. Flush on the river. I'm really not worried about it. I should have the best hand here. I decide to bet 1/4 pot. Super minuscule, right? Because I only have 36 blinds. At this point, if I'm going to get bluffed, it's going to be for my whole stack. So he's going to jam all in on a bluff, right? Also, he never has the ace of clubs here. So if he does have something like the jack of clubs, maybe even the 10 of clubs, maybe he had the 10 on the flop and ran out clubs, right? Maybe I can get the crying call from this, right? Because this is a very scary board. And that's basically my feeling. I do get the crying call, and my man flopped the pair of 10s and ran out the clubs. And this is just a good example of he didn't protect his hand. Like when he flops this flop, check this out. Show known hole cards. My man is 74% to win here. Why are you not raising? Like, you have the best hand here the vast majority of the time. Are you literally sitting there going, oh, the guy could have jacks, he raised pre-flop? What? So, no, this is a raise. And if I'm in this guy's seat, I'm probably going somewhere around 15, maybe 12. But I'm definitely raising. And I'm going bigger. No, I'm probably going 15 to 18. And if my man wants to jam, I will happily call. You'd be amazed how many times people will jam with the king-queen here. It's just funny to me. My man was so far ahead and he just didn't protect himself at all. You don't protect yourself, you get hurt. 10-9 out of the big blind, or out of the first position. 10-9 suited. Can be played in any position with almost any stack depth for a raise. Fun fact. Flop comes off 7 high. There's, again, this is that frequency thing we're talking about on the flop section. This doesn't hit the pre-flop raiser's range. When that's the case, I should not be betting these boards frequently. But when I do bet them, I should be betting them bigger. So you got to make bigger moves because you're going to make them less frequently and they have to be more effective. Player calls. Ace on the turn should be good for my range, but there is now a flush draw out there. So if you were sitting here with ace-king, would you love this spot? Not really. So I just decide to check it. My opponent does check back. River comes off a 3. Not really much changes there. I mean, yes, 4-5 and 7-5 get there, and so does deuce-5 and lots of 2 pairs. But because of the flush draw being present and I didn't bet the turn, it kind of allows me to bluff like I have a flush. So I make a nice sizable value bet for the river and my opponent folds. And you don't have to overbet this one because it's supposed to look like standard value, meaning I have a good hand and you have to have a great hand to raise me. So if you have a good hand too, you can call. Like 2 pair can call, but I have a good hand. And my good hand is usually going to be a flush. That's basically what that bet says. So you raise and a call and a call and a call and a call. And this guy jam lambs all in. I kind of wanted to run this spot. This player did fold. Oh yeah, I did. This is why I wanted to run it. I wanted to do the math on it. So here we go. So the total pot is going to be this guy's 26.88 plus my 26.88 when I call, plus this 2, this 1, and this 2. So that's 5. Plus this guy's side action of 15.82. Now, granted, we're supposed to play for different pots, but this is the total. And it's going to cost me 24.88. So we're going to say 75. Okay, so 25 divided by 75. I only need 33% equity. And at the time, I said that out loud, and it's in the video. You can look. And I said, I think I only need 33% equity. Versus each player individually, maybe that's the way to run it. So let's try that. So we're going to say 5 big blinds for what's in the middle, plus 26.88, plus my 26.88 when I call, equals 58.76. So then it would be 24.88 divided by, what did I say, 58.76. So I need 42% equity versus this player alone. And then versus this player alone, heads up, it's like 58%, or it's like 50-50. I'm not going to run the math on it. So this is a call because I had it, you know, the deck versus these hands has 33% equity versus these ranges. Let's see versus the actual hands. I actually have 43%. Interesting. And it ran out clean. And this was a huge pot. And I was glad that I recognized the spot that the price was too good. And yeah, and before I called it, I said, I only need 33%, and these two guys could just have unpaired cards. That's exactly what they did. And when they both have unpaired cards, it's kind of great for me because they're usually sharing one, right? They're sharing the ace. Nice. I just wanted to run the numbers on it to make sure I was right. I felt like I was, and I made the call, so it's whatever. This is annoying. No, this wasn't the hand I'm thinking of. So it gets raised here and 3-bet, and I thought about this one for quite a while, and I wanted to look it up. So let me look it up. Like, in game, it felt like the best play, but... So I'm on the button with 33 blinds, right? Yeah. 33 blinds. It's raised by the low jack and 3-bet by the cutoff. I feel like this is going to be so obvious. So blinds, we'll call it at 30. My position is the button. Action is versus a 3-bet, not all in, versus a regular 3-bet. Opponent's position. See, it's saying small blind. The problem here is that there's no... It means a 3-bet where I raised and somebody else 3-bet. So... there's no, like, versus a raise and a 3-bet. I guess we just call it... Oh, you know what? Here's what I can do. I can put this on the big blind. And then the actions are... I mean, I guess it's versus... No, I mean, but it's... But see, but this doesn't... Oh, the other opponent's... Okay. So versus a raise from the other opponent's position of the cutoff... Yeah, it's an all-in with 10s there versus a 4-bet from the cutoff. I mean, it's small blind. There's no right way to get this answer. Oh, yeah, there is. Never mind. Hang on. Yeah, 10-10's an all-in here. I can use a different one. Hang on. We can go to push-fold charts. Our position is the button. We have... oh, it doesn't go high enough. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't go high enough. Yeah. Oh, well. Oh, well. I think it's a jam. So this player raised. This one 3-bet. If I 4-bet, I'm going to have way too many of my chips in the pot. I can't fold. These two players are on big stacks. I was kind of middle of the stack, or middle of the tournament at this point. We weren't quite in the cash yet, and I felt like the jam was the best move. And I go from 33 blinds up to 44. Kind of a big jump. I definitely like it. Sorry, Courtney's on the way home. All right, so it's just interesting. I think it's a good jam. I don't have the right tools up to show me by the numbers, but it worked, so fuck it. Raise here. I make the call. Make a 10. Pretty good. I decided to raise right on the flop. You can see, like, this is another one where I've outflopped my opponent most of the time. It's better to just get money in. Like, because if he has an overpair, he's going to tell me right now. Player folds, and I'll just take it down. That's fine. But there's a lot of gut shots here. There's a lot of overcards. If he has king, queen, ace, king, all those things. let's see here. All right, let's go on to the next one. King 10 suited. See a raise, get called. I decided to go ahead and bet. This one hits my frequencies quite a bit. So I had to go ahead and bet small. I do have the hand. Turn comes off. I can bet pretty big here because I should just be up against a bunch of draws. If he has a better king, he's going to let me know. Player does raise. It took quite a while for him to do this, and I thought it out, and I realized I really can't fold here. And the truth of the matter is I shouldn't fold, because what kings are calling me here pre-flop that aren't 3-betting? Like, the only things I really lose to here are sets. So most likely I'm up against a draw, and when the straight draw comes out on the turn, I feel like this is just a call all day. We were super deep in the tournament at this point. I did call it, and my man had the flush draw. The truth of the matter is he should have 3-bet me pre-flop. And if he 3-bets me pre-flop, I'm probably going to call, and then on this flop, I'm going to either check and raise, in which case he gets off cheaper, or I'm most likely going to check, he'll bet, I'll call, the turn will go check, check, and then the river I will bet, and he can decide whether or not he can bluff me. And honestly, if I bet the river and he jams all in, kind of can't call. So, interesting. Pocket nines. One player raises, this player 3-bets. This was another interesting one because we were so super deep, but oh god, so good. I didn't want to just call this. This player had been opening super wide. This looks insane. But if I 3-bet this to 20 blinds, I've got almost a third of my stack in. So I went with the jam. And it worked. Here's the thing. This player was making a move. And I knew he was making a move. This player was opening wide. And I knew he was opening wide. So the jam is best. And I don't believe this is too early on in the tournament either. Yeah. This one had a 10K starting stack, so we're all pretty stacked up. So I like the way that I played it. 6-6, I decide to defend. Not a great flop, but player bets 1/4 pot. He should just be betting a third pot. This quarter pot creative bullshit needs to stop because it's not a thing. If you look at any solver, you're rarely betting a quarter pot. It's just ridiculous. So I decided to go ahead and call it. I feel like I'm best. The turn comes off and he bets 2/3 pot. This has now become just ridiculous to me that I have the best hand, so I decide to call again. The 3 on the river kind of seals it up. I checked it, and as soon as he checked back in game, I was like, damn it. And my man showed over ace-10. Like, why are you betting here? Like, what like, you're starting out with a shitty ace to start with for your position. Why are you even betting here if you're not actually going to represent this king? Is this how you think you represent a king? Like, because does a king need... If you have ace-king, are you betting this fucking flop? Like, why not check it? You're so fucking far ahead. I mean, occasionally I'm going to have a 3, but you can't avoid that anyway. So you might as well check it and then bet the turn. Then I might call you with a 5. You know what I'm saying? I might pick up a straight draw. Then when the river comes off a 3, you know, you can just go fucking banana crackers. But this is just a bad play all around. Like, started off bad and just followed through bad. I decided to call out of the small blind. I like doing this sometimes because I didn't know what this player was going to do, and honestly, I like underplaying the ace-queen here. Plus, keeps my range wide. I can do whatever the fuck I want because he doesn't know what I have, right? He has no range advantage on me. Bets 1/2 pot. I decide to go ahead and float it. King on the turn's not great for me. Goes check, check. River makes a heart. 2 kings on board. Very unlikely he has one. Looking back, I should have just check raised the flop. If I check raise the flop, I don't have to worry about this run out. And even when the king hits the turn, I can bet again. And even if he has a king, he's not going to love it. And when the heart comes off, I can continue betting, and it's going to get the fold. As it runs out, I did win this pot, but the way that if I had check raised the flop, I win either a pot right on the flop or I win a much bigger pot in this specific instance. So I think that was the mistake there, although it did work out. You know, it's a fine avenue to take, but I think because I'm underplaying my ace queen, I had a no range definition, so I definitely think I should have done something a little bit more creative than that by check raising the flop. Plus, there's so many draws out there, right? Like, you can never feel good about having overcards there. This is a fun one. This one was my favorite hand of the day yesterday. So I raised, and the flop comes out just gin juice for my range, right? It goes check. This player leads now from the big blind for 2.23. And notice he only has 17 3/4 blinds left. There's not a lot of playability going on here. I thought the strongest hand he's ever going to lead here is an ace. And he may even lead a lot of gut shots. So I floated it. This is what I would do with ace-king in this scenario. What would I do with any king in this scenario? I would do this. He checks. I decide to bet. And this bet is to represent a king. Because if I just jam all in, he's going to fold, right? This could also represent a hand like ace-queen. So it kind of doesn't really define it. It's a little over half pot. I think it's fine. It looks like I'm trying to get all of his money in. So essentially, I'm leveraging his whole stack. Whereas he can't call if he makes a good decision, he can't call. But if he's got a good hand like an ace-jack or ace-queen, he can jam in on me and then I can just fold, right? So I leveraged his stack. He did decide to call it, and the river comes off, and he checks. My man only has 11 blinds left, but there's only one bet to make, and he folds. This is my favorite hand of the day. This just shows how completely you need to be thinking about the game, and some people just do wacky shit. I think he just did something wacky. Like, I think he had that gut shot, like with queen 10 or jack 10, and he picked up a spade draw on the turn, maybe, and he just kind of went nuts and gave up more than half his stack. It was really hilarious. And to be able to bluff somebody when they only have 10 blinds left is just fucking fantastic. Make a raise from the small blind, my standard 3.5x. I can have all the aces and kings. My opponent usually cannot, so I go ahead and check because I should be okay. Plus, there's a small chance he has an ace. It goes check, check. I feel pretty good about it now. I do decide to bet on the small side because I don't feel like he has much ever here. He calls. I decide to bet the river for value. I should be good here. I feel like 60-70% of the time. Oh, 68% of the time. Look at that. Just because of the way the betting worked out, he's going to have more draws than hands. Sometimes he's going to have a weak-ass king here. But I kind of doubt it, right? Like, after I check the flop, like, don't you kind of bet a king, you know? He calls with a pair. I just don't know what I'm raising that can't beat a 6 here, right? Like, I'd have to have, like, a random 9-10. And if I had 9-10, I would not have played the fucking hand this way. I would have bet on that flop and bet that turn. So, it's the checking on the flop for me. Raise out of first. Get 3-bet. Why am I looking at this one? Oh, I think I marked this one because it's going to be in a video. Because it's kind of silly. Is it silly? Why did I mark that? I think I mismarked this one. I don't know why. I mean, it was a lot of chips, but I don't know why I marked it. Weird. Huh. Oh, well. I don't know. Maybe I mismarked one. Oh, this was my jam on the end. Or no, this was my jam. So this player raised. I had taken a huge beat. I had pocket threes. Where's that hand? Is it not marked? No. Don't tell me I didn't mark it. Well, I had pocket threes in the small blind. The guy in first position went all in, and it was a bounty tournament, right? So he goes all in for like 5 blinds, and I had like 66 blinds, and it folds all the way around to me, and the guy in the big blind has like 60 blinds. And so I have pocket threes, so I just jam all in, right? Because I'm like, I'm not going to 3-bet and play a guessing game here, and this guy's going to have to wake up with a hand. The dude tanked, and then finally called me off with queens. And it's hilarious because I think his dividing line was probably jacks or lower. And I just so happened to run into a top 5% hand. What the fuck? You know what I'm saying? And it was small blind. I was in the small blind. He was in the big blind. And the other guy had jammed out of first. And so I lost 90% of my chips. But it's so super rare. It's not even worth marking, apparently. I jammed all in here. I think I marked this one for a video. I get called twice. Oh, this is funny. This player jams all in, right? And when this happened, I was like, I mean, versus 2 players, I like it. I got a chance to triple up here, and I can win and get back in the game. And then as soon as he bet, I went, well, I'm not going to win because of this fucking ace. And my dude folds out the other player, and I got lucky. So I'm right back in the game with 20 blinds. That was amazing. I just thought that was fun to show. See a raise and a call. I could have 3-bet this, but honestly, it's not really worth it. Goes check, check, check. Turn is the 5 of spades. I pick up the draw. I maybe should have bet bigger here, but when he calls on the end, I should. This is the bet that's too small. If I made this like 12 or 13, I think it's okay. I don't think this opponent has a jack very often, unless he has a very good jack, and he's checking. So I don't like this bet. I think it should have been bigger. I made it too easy for him to call. And he hit the gut shot on the river on me. It's kind of hilarious because I'm obviously not ever getting him to fold. He calls on the turn because of the spade draw with the gut shot, but I don't like it, man. I don't think it's very good at all. And he hit an exact 3-outer. And if that spade comes off, I'm going to bet again, and I'm going to bet much bigger, and he's going to pay me. That's the funny part. Pocket tens. We see a raise and a call. I have 48 blinds. I decide to make a 3-bet. A little low. I felt like this player was prone to jam. I thought about it for a good long time and then folded. It just didn't seem... I mean, when I said this prone to jam, I meant this player. It just didn't seem good to me. I ran the numbers, and from a purely value range, I'm supposed to call, but I believe versus this player's exact range, I'm supposed to fold. And that's why I 3-bet. I 3-bet to find out what his exact range was. I just don't think it's a race very often at all. I think most of the time he's got me crushed. Queens are better. I raise, player calls in the big. Ace and the second nut flush draw is pretty much as good as it gets. I decide to bet. This is that micro bet. Now, see, I'm using it because I'm just trying to trickle some amount of money into the pot. Make the flush on the turn. It has to go check, check, because when I bet and get action, I'm beat. Ace on the river is kind of great because it makes my hand look like such bullshit. And this opponent leads out 5 big blinds. Now, this is a larger river donk than I would expect. I would expect half or a third pot if he was just blocker betting. So I decide this is enough and just call it. And I don't think I would have bet much bigger on the river. I think 5 is fine. Maybe I go 5.5, but it's that close. And yeah, he just had a 9 and turned it into a bluff. Because, like, again, I can't have many aces and I shouldn't have many hearts, right? So it's just a fun little hand. And it was really it was very interesting to me. Let's see here. How's this sound? I never checked the sound today. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start the next section of the flop section, flop strategy of the Tournament Masterclass. This is when you are the pre-flop aggressor, meaning you raised, and you have the range advantage. I'm talking about 40 big blinds, range advantage. The example is Ace, Jack, 5. And we're going to get into this. And these are specific types of flops and how you can play on them. So, yeah, let's do it. Let me turn the sound on here.
All right, now you know when to bet and how much. So let's go through a bunch of examples to make sure you know how to navigate all sorts of scenarios that you are likely to encounter at the poker table. And first, we're going to discuss, as the pre-flop raiser, when you are 40 big blinds or deeper, when you have the range advantage. So these are all going to be scenarios coming up that are pretty decent for the initial raiser. And first we're going to talk about ace of spades, jack of hearts, five of spades. Thinking back over here to the range advantage flowchart, this is going to be a spot where we are going to want to bet frequently, right? Because we know we have the range advantage. And I'm going to show you, using a program called the Poker Coaching Range Analyzer, how to figure that out after assessing your range. So again, to be very clear, you raise under the gun +1, big blind calls, flop comes ace, jack, 5, 2 spades, and the big blind checks. Okay, we're going to use the range analyzer. It's right there in the tool section at pokercoaching.com, and when you click on it, it's going to bring up this page. All right, if you have never used the range analyzer, you need to watch the instructions for use. Click this video, please watch this. It's going to make navigating these scenarios a million times easier, okay? It's very important. You need to watch the instructions to use this tool. This is a tool that I use, my students use, and it will help you understand how to play fundamentally sound poker if you go through the process of this whenever you are analyzing any scenario. So make sure you click the instructions. And again, if you need help, click the contact us tab. We're happy to help you. Okay, so here's what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to show you exactly how I go through figuring out how I want to categorize the hands in my range into premium made hands, draws, marginal made hands, and junk. All right, first things first. Click right here, standard labels. We're going to be post-flop aggressor. There's also pre-flop tags, but post-flop aggressor is what we need. Premium made hands, draws, marginal made hands, and junk. Okay, flop was ace of spades, jack of hearts, 5 of spades. We're typing these in the dead cards area because these cards are no longer available to be in people's hands, right? And now we want to go through and put in our entire pre-flop range. I'm just going to put them all in junk initially. I know roughly what this range looks like. You can go back and reference the pre-flop section. We are under the gun +1 playing 40 big blinds deep, so it's going to be something like this. I think we got it. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to take our time and go very slowly and categorize every single hand here into a premium made hand, draw, marginal made hand, or junk. And we just want to do this very logically initially. We don't want to be worried about balancing our range at all. We just want to go through and categorize these hands. So what are premium made hands on ace, jack, 5? Well, aces, jacks, 5s, ace, jack, ace, 5 suited. Right? These are all obviously premium. Ace, king, and ace, queen are certainly very good. I would venture to say, like, ace 10's pretty good. We can be pretty happy betting ace 10 on all 3 streets against the big blind. Then these lower aces, you're going to find that these start to fall into the marginal category.
So you see what he's doing here is he's creating a visual representation of premiums, draws, marginal made hands, and junk. So he's selecting everything that was in his range in junk, right? So under the gun +1, this is everything he's raising was in gray. And then now you can classify them. His premiums are now red. His draws will be, blue on this board. Greens will be, marginal made.
Usually top pair marginal kicker likes to check. And also, it's nice to bet some of your premium made hands and check some of your premium made hands. Well, strong premium. Strong. It's best to check some of your weakest premium hands, like ace 9 in this scenario. Under pairs are usually marginal. King, jack, queen, jack are marginal. Jack 10, jack 9 are marginal. 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s are all marginal. And then we can go through and we can add in the draws. Is king, queen a draw on ace, jack, 5? Well, it's a gut shot, so that counts. King 10 suited, queen 10 suited, both clear draws. And now we can go through and add in the backdoor flush draws, because I think we certainly can get away with betting the spades and hearts here. So if you want to select exactly the spades and hearts, you go down here, click on spades and hearts. And now, click on these. These are all backdoor flush draws or front door flush draws.
Didn't know that.
Okay. So we've done this, but now notice something's happened here. We no longer have king 9 of diamonds or clubs in this range. They're actually now listed in the not in range category, but they should still be in our range. So what we need to do is we need to go through and we need to count all of the hands that have been unselected that are now not in range that should be somewhere else. So this king high here, premium made hand, draw, marginal made hand, or junk, just king 9 of diamonds. It's pretty much junk, right? This is a hand that will check it back and fold if our opponent bets. This is not a good hand, right? So same thing for queen 9, same thing for 9-8, etc. So there are 2 combinations of each of these that need to be moved to the junk range. Sometimes you'll find that some of these are actually marginal, sometimes they're junk. So you need to actually think about how you would play, or where each of these would fall. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 hands here. We put this in the adjust feature. And now this is what our range looks like. Okay, we have now gone through and naturally categorized this range into premium made hands, draws, marginal made hands, and junk. All right, now remember, draws and premium made hands kind of go together. You can have 2 draws to every 1 premium hand. But notice here, we actually have more premium hands than we do draws. Well, why is that? That's because this range, or this flop, is actually really good for our range. We're going to have a big range advantage here. When we're going to have a big range...
Because we're in early position. We're more likely to raise hands that hit this flop than didn't.
Range advantage, that means that we are going to be betting frequently, right? So we already know that we are strong here. Whenever you have more premium made hands than draws, just naturally, when you naturally break it down, you're usually going to be pretty strong. Marginal made hands to junk also go together. Notice here we have 44% to 6%, which is, this is like 85% to 15% roughly, something like that. But remember, we can have a 70-30 ratio. So again, the stronger portion of this range, the marginal made range, has more hands in it than necessary. So again, this is going to be an indication that we have a strong range. If we had a lot of junk for some reason, then this is a scenario that would indicate we don't have much of an advantage. If we had a ton of draws, same story. It would also indicate a scenario where we don't have much of an advantage. But in this situation, we actually have a big range advantage and a big nut advantage. So whenever that's the case, instead of betting these 2 hands, the premium made hands and draws, as you do if you don't have a range/nut advantage, we also just want to bet everything. So we would go through here and manually edit this to say bet. Why are we betting with this? Because we have a big range advantage, big nut advantage. We were informed by that, or we were informed of that by the fact that we don't have nearly enough draws in our range and we don't have nearly enough junk in our range, which means our range is just generally going to be strong across the board. Okay? And then if you wanted to save this image, you could actually save values to this file. It'll save it on your computer. And if you wanted to upload it later, you choose that file, upload it, and it'll bring it right back up. Again, watch the instructions, please. That's going to make your life a million times easier. Okay, so I think that's actually the image I have here. Let's see, 30, 19, 44, 6. 30, 19, 44, 6. So good. You see, we perfectly replicated this same image because this is just the logical way to break down these hands. Now, you may have broken these hands down slightly differently and categorized them differently. Like let's say you say ace 9 is a premium hand and ace 8 is a premium hand, like sure, right? Notice that's going to give you fewer marginal hands but more premium hands, but again, the strong portions of your range are still pretty strong. You maybe would not bluff all of these junky bluffs like 9-8 of hearts, but that's just going to give you a little bit more junk. So again, this is a scenario where you are always going to have an extreme lack of draws and junk. So given you have an extreme lack of draws and junk, that indicates a big range advantage. When you have a big range advantage, you know you want to be betting frequently. So this is a spot where we're going to be betting frequently with our entire range. Okay? In terms of sizing, this is a scenario where you're probably going to mix up your sizing a little bit, but this is a spot where typically I would just bet medium. I do think you don't need to bet too large here because the board's not so great for the big blind to the point that they will not continue with stuff like king high. Like if they have king jack or king 10, they're still going to call, right? So I think a medium size here is probably good. What I've actually done now, though, is I've ran this scenario through the solver. There's a program called PioSolver that will run heads-up scenarios, and you essentially put in your range, you put in your opponent's range, and now you assume the opponents play well. You can tinker with the solver to say, my opponent's not going to play well. Maybe they fold too often, or maybe they check raise too often, whatever. You can force the opponent to play in a specific way, and then you can still get the correct answer. A lot of people look at solver images and think, oh, my opponent doesn't play GTO, so this doesn't matter. But in reality, the solver will solve whatever scenario you tell it, even if you make the solver assume your opponent doesn't play perfectly. Anyway, in this scenario, if the opponent does play well, as you can see, the solver is betting very frequently. It's only checking 5% of the time. And when the solver does something a tiny portion of the time, 5, 10, 15%, you can pretty much ignore it. So this is a spot where we know we're betting every time. And notice here the bet sizing is actually pretty evenly split between 2/3 pot and 1/3 pot. It's betting 2/3 pot 46% of the time, 1/3 pot 48% of the time. Like I said, that's probably why it's okay to use like a medium bet size in this scenario, because the opponent's range connectivity is kind of there, but certainly not great. And as you see, the solver is just betting everything, which confirms what I said, right? Confirms what the range analyzer said. And the tough thing about studying with a solver is that you don't know why the solver is doing what it's doing. But I'm telling you, everything we've discussed so far is pretty much the reason why, or the reasons why the solver elects to do what it does. There's certainly going to be some corner cases where we're going to be slightly off or where we're going to be wrong compared to what the solver does. But understand, we're not trying to perfectly replicate a solver. We're not supercomputers here. We're mere humans. And we have to do our best with the tools we have. And we also need to be able to study these scenarios quickly and efficiently away from the table. And you like, notice if we go back to this chart here, it's not all that hard to categorize each of these hands at the table. You know what your preflop range looks like roughly. You may be off by a hand or two. And you know that King 9 of spades on this board and King 9 of hearts on this board is either junk or draw, right? You also know, though, that you have lots of good aces, you have lots of good big cards, and you know you have a range advantage here because we've already studied that a decent amount. So this is a situation where you know you're just betting very frequently, and you should be able to reasonably categorize all of your hands. Like, you know King Jack in this scenario is not a hand that is premium. You're not betting King Jack on the flop and the turn and the river for value, right? You're going to check it at some point. Anyway, your goal is to be able to categorize all these hands appropriately and then make that play. Notice here we also have the equity advantage here listed. This is the range advantage for the initial raiser. You see it's 69%, which is through the roof. So this is a spot where under the gun +1 is going to bet every time, usually using roughly a medium size. All right, 40 big blinds is not a word. Doesn't like that. All right, let's take a look at another scenario. Now you raise the button and the big blind calls. So now we're raising the button instead of under the gun +1, okay? Which means we're going to have a much wider range. Flop comes ace jack 5, big blind checks. Now, again, you would go back to the range analyzer and input a button raising range. I'm not going to do it again because I just showed you how to do it. But you need to go through and you need to do these exercises. You need to practice. And, you know, not necessarily for these specific situations because I've already done it for you, but change the board to ace 10 7 and see what changes, right? You want to be exploring these situations, saving them and referencing them whenever you feel like it, right? Or whenever you run into spots like this. By the way, if you want to just save a preflop range, what you can do is if we had this range, let's say, like I said, you could just label it all junk, and you could save that range, and then you could upload that range again later if you wanted to study the same scenario where you're playing with an under the gun +1 range. That way you don't have to keep going back and re-entering the same range over and over and over again. So if you wanted to go through and study button versus big blind spots, you could put this entire button range into the range analyzer, save it, and then on various scenarios, whenever you want to reference it again, just load up the button range again. Okay, so now we've categorized our hands. Notice now that earlier I said ace 9 was perhaps like marginal for under the gun +1. Against for the button, though, it's much stronger, and that's because the button's range is much wider, right? And also because the big blind is going to continue with a wider range against the button than they are against the big blind, which means that slightly weaker but still strong made hands can perhaps become premium and good enough to bet all three streets. So let's take a look at how we have categorized this. Ace 6 and better can value bet. Notice we have jack 5 suited this time. Marginal made hands. These are going to be hands like under pairs, pair of jacks, pair of 5s, right? Really just any pair. I have 4s, 3s, and 2s listed as marginal. They may actually count as junk, but, you know. I do want to make this very clear. Whenever I call a hand marginal, it means if I do check this hand at any point, I'm planning on calling on the next betting round if I face a bet. Which, you know, 4s, 3s, and 2s may not fall in that category. But, like, if I had jack 10, if I happen to check this flop, I'm definitely not folding it to one bet on the turn. And a junk hand is a hand that, you know, could still win at the showdown. Like right here, if we...
Doesn't mean you're automatically calling the river. It means, like, if you raise the button with jack 10 and a flop comes off ace jack 5 like this, you may elect to check the jack sometimes because you're either way ahead or way behind. And then on the turn, if the big blind leads into you, like donks out, you're definitely not going to fold. But if they lead river after you call, you're probably going to fold. But at the same time, if they check the river, you're probably good. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to bet it, but you're probably just going to have the best hand. They just took a shot at you, and you didn't put yourself in a situation where you don't know what's going on, and you gave up the ghost. So, like, if you were to c-bet that flop and got called, like, unless your opponent has a draw that misses, he's not going to have a lot of bluffs against you. So you're going to bet the flop, you're going to check the turn, and then if he bets river, if the draw comes in, you're probably going to have to fold. Also, if he bets big on the river, you're probably going to have to fold because he might just have an ace. But if the draw misses and, you know, he bets, you can probably call. So it's one of those things where maybe you wanted to not set yourself up for a disaster. Sorry, got a message.
Check it down with king 9, let's say. You see king 9 offsuit's listed as junk. If we check, check, flop, check, check, turn, check, check, river, we actually still win some portion of the time. So junk doesn't mean it has 0 equity. It just means that if our opponent bets, we're going to fold. Whereas the hands in green, the marginal hands, are going to call if our opponent bets. All right. All the pairs are marginal. Again, I just went through and quickly categorized these. All the hands in blue I have listed as draws. Now, the term draw gets really loose here, as you can see. And this is because we are trying to categorize these hands as either junk or draws. And if you take a look at this, I went through and I was very aggressive calling some of these hands draws. Like, is 10-8 offsuit a draw here? It's basically just a backdoor straight draw, right? Is a backdoor straight draw a draw? It's like, barely, right? What about queen 8 suited? Barely. What about queen 2 of hearts? Barely. What about 6-4? Barely, right? These hands in the draw category certainly could have fit in the junk category. However, notice we have 20% premium made hands here, which means we can have at most 40% draws. Remember, a 2-to-1 ratio. So whenever you're trying to find draws, because on ace-jack-5 there really aren't a ton of logical draws, you take hands that would otherwise be called junk, like let's say 10-8 and 10-9, and you add those to the draw category. Usually you're going to take hands that have backdoor straight draws, backdoor flush draws, maybe an overcard to the board, which you can't really have on ace-jack-5, and add those to the betting range. Usually you're going to use hands that have the least amount of showdown value first, unless they're just really bad. Like right here, 8-6 of diamonds is just really bad, right? So we don't need to bet that. And to be fair, 10-9 and 10-8 could be a stretch. Okay, slow down though. Let's take a look. Even after working hard to break down this range, notice we still have too few draws, right? Because remember, we can have up to 40%. And the marginal made-handed junk range is about that 70-30 ratio. So here we lack a bit of draws and a bit of junk. Not a ton, but a bit, right? And for that reason, we still are going to have a reasonable range advantage. And perhaps more importantly in this spot, we also have the nut advantage. And if you look at my marginal made hands, they're actually all pretty good compared to a big blind calling range, right? And even if you are behind, well, let's say Jack 10 and your opponent has Ace 2, you still have some outs to improve. So this is a spot where, again, notice we have a lack of draws. We have a little bit too little junk. And so this is a spot where I think we can justify betting frequently with our entire range because we have a bit of a range advantage again. Notice, though, that we don't have as big of an equity advantage, right? Our equity advantage has decreased because our range is just wider to begin with. And so you notice equity goes down, solver still bets very frequently, but now it bets smaller. Remember, when you have the nut advantage, you want to bet bigger. Here we don't have as big of a nut advantage at all, and that's going to result in us betting using a smaller size. Okay? One thing worth noting, whenever the solver does opt to check, take a look at the hands it is opting to check some sliver of the time. I'm not saying that we should check here ever, but if you are going to check, the hands that you want to check are the marginal made hands first, right? Pocket 10s, pocket 9s, pocket 8s. Stuff like Jack 6 suited, Ace 3 suited, pocket kings, King 10 suited for king high, right? Again, you should be betting virtually every time in this scenario, but you're going to see very consistently that the hands that the solver likes to check are the marginal made hands. These are always the first hands that get checked. And that is telling. It means that whenever you do have marginal made hands, checking is at least like viable, right? What a lot of people do wrong, of course, in this scenario is they just check all of the hands in green, and then that's a big problem because then they're checking, 33% of their range, which is a disaster because the solver only checks 4% of the time. Notice here I am betting everything again, but that's just because we have a straight range advantage here. As you see, again, equity, 61%, and that's certainly big enough to bet with everything. Remember, if we go back to the flow chart here, if we have usually like 58% equity or more, that's going to imply a strong range advantage, and we want to bet frequently. And here we have 60, so it's a strong range advantage. We're going to want to bet frequently. All right, let's take a look at one more scenario on ace-jack-5. Now, under the gun +1 raises and the button calls. So under the gun +1 is now out of position. And did I write this wrong? You raise under the gun +1, and the button calls. Here we go. My bad. That doesn't need to be there. All right. Now, we want to categorize our range. As you see, it breaks down to the exact same thing as before. But, very importantly, now we lack position.
I know this is all very complex, and there's a lot of parts to it. This is going to be on YouTube. Don't worry. You can go through this as many times as you like. For me, I've gone through this particular section. Like, this is one of the ones where, when I say I've gone through this thing 1.5 times, I went through the tournament masterclass a full session. It took me about a month when it was first released, and I marked down sections that I wanted to go through again and again. And what I did was I went back and just worked on them multiple times a day. Like, I would start my day by going through this section, play, do whatever I had to throughout the day, and then at the end of the night, review my hands and go through this section again. And if I still felt like there was more to it, I would not check it off the list. I would go through it again the next day and the next day. And there were some of these sections, especially in the flop section, that I had to go through 4 or 5 times in a row before all of this sunk in. Eventually, this becomes second nature thinking. So don't feel overwhelmed. Understand, it's a lot of material, and you're going to need repetition on this. So subscribe to the YouTube.
And our opponent's range on the button is going to connect better with the board than the big blind's range, right? So now our range advantage and our nut advantage have both decreased substantially compared to when we were under the gun +1 against the big blind. Okay? So now we have to bet less often. And an easy way to just straight up do this is to check your marginal made hands and your junk. Whenever your range advantage decreases, check your marginal made hands and your junk, and that's usually going to be fine.
So when you have less bets often, you know what I'm saying, versus this board, because the button has, you know, the positional advantage, and, you know, you raise under the gun and the button calls, you're really just kind of becoming linear on this flop. You're betting your good hands, you're betting your good draws, and you're checking everything else. And because you're out of position, that's kind of the way you have to play it. It's kind of hard to play a very polarized or combined strategy out of position as a general rule. Out of position, because the other player can always reopen the betting. You know, he's on the button, you're under the gun. If you check, he can always bet. If you bet, he can always raise. You're not closing the action. You don't have information on what he's going to do first. You're just going to end up checking more as a general rule. So if you go linear out of position and polarized in position, it'll just win you tournaments. That's a straight fact.
And notice here, this is the exact same breakdown as big blind versus under the gun +1, except for now, instead of betting everything, we're checking some hands. And we can compare this to what the solver does and see if it lines up somewhat with it. And you'll see here, solver checks 28% of the time now, because we lack range advantage and nut advantage. Notice here we still have a bit of a range advantage, 60%, which is pretty high. And we still are betting pretty frequently, right? We're betting 73%, 74% of the time, which is a lot. But we are checking sometimes. And if you look at the hands that like to check, it's mostly marginal made hands, like low ace X, right? Pocket kings, queens, 10s, 9s, 8s. Stuff like some just total give-ups, so like 10-8 of diamonds, right? That's giving up. Stuff like king 8 of diamonds is giving up. Stuff like queen 9 of diamonds is giving up. So as you can see, like these hands here that are junk are checking, and the hands that are marginal are checking, and that lines up with exactly what I was doing. Now, it is worth noting here, I was checking about 50% of the time, which is more than the solver. And I think that is actually okay. I know some people who want to play perfect GTO are going to say, oh, we should try to figure out what we could do differently. What we could do differently, I can already tell you, is just bet more premium hands, right? You can just bet more ace X's and bet with some other perhaps marginal made hands. That would clear that up a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. The goal is to play a good, strong, implementable strategy. And I will definitely say that whenever you are playing against normal type opponents, when you check this flop, they're going to think you're weak. So if they think you're weak, they're often going to start bluffing you. If they're going to start bluffing you, you in turn need to make sure you are finding reasonable calls. Okay?
This is that scenario that comes up all the time where you have ace king, you've raised, the button calls. And for me, in tournaments at the level I play, most of the time you can check the ace king because they're going to bluff you so frequently, right? Now, granted, you need to think about their range, but like, let's say you smash this flop, right? Let's say you have aces and you just smash the flop. Let's make it easier. Let's say you have jacks. Sorry, I'm getting text. So let's say you have pocket jacks, you raised under the gun. I mean, should you really bet there? I mean, probably, yeah. But versus a player who's prone to bluff or just has numbers that says that he likes to bluff and bet flops and stuff like that, you can check all the time and just set up the trap amazingly there. And it's a very old move with a new twist. But I've expanded that. I like it with ace king. I like it with ace queen. You know what I'm saying? Because the only hands we really have to worry about is ace jack. And when you check the flop and then the turn goes check check, you may be able to bet the river and get another street of value. Whereas if you're up against somebody with like ace queen or ace 10, right? So like if you raise pre-flop, they called, you bet the flop, bet the turn, bet the river. Are they really going to call you all three streets with ace 10? Probably not. But if you check this flop and then they bet the flop when you check to them and then the turn goes check check, you can probably make a bigger bet on the river and get called because it just looks like you're full of shit, right? You'll also get people who will call a check raise on the flop and a bet on the turn and a bet on the river when you check that ace king and they do have that ace 10. Believe it or not, you can actually get a fourth street of betting by check raising. It's kind of hilarious.
You want to make sure that you are check calling down enough. An easy way to make sure you're check calling down enough is to make sure you're protecting your checking range by checking with some strong marginal made hands that you know are not folding. Now let's take a look at a few other things the solver may do slightly differently than our, call it somewhat simple breakdown. Notice the solver slow plays sometimes, pocket aces and pocket jacks out of position. It is worth noting. Notice it does not slow play ace jack and ace 5 and pocket 5s though. The reason that checks pocket aces and pocket jacks sometimes is because you really block your opponent's continuing range. Like if you have pocket aces, it's just hard for your opponent to have anything great. And you get a check raise sometimes. Getting in a check raise or really protecting your checking and calling range is very nice. You'll also notice solver, whenever it's striving to find additional bluffs, because if it's betting more frequently, as you see it's betting just more of these lower ace X hands, it needs to find more bluffs. And it really doesn't want to bluff stuff like king 8 of diamonds because that's just really bad. So instead it opts to bet the lower pairs more frequently, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But you see whenever it has a lower pair, it's betting it pretty frequently. And the reason for that is because it's the best hand sometimes. When your opponent folds, you pick up the pot. And if you do get called, every once in a while you spike a set and then you can win a big pot. So it's kind of like a junky draw / value bet / protection bet. So a weird play, but you will see the solver using the small pairs as, we'll call it bluffs, when you don't have any other logical draws. And you can see here the solver's already using the draws it can, right? It's using king queen, it's using king 10, it's using queen 10, right? It's using like queen 9, queen 10, 10 9 backdoor flush draw. So it's trying to find draws and it just can't find any more. And instead of just using total garbage like king 8 of diamonds or 10 8 of diamonds, it opts to use the lower pairs instead. These are things that are going to be a little bit harder to clearly nail down with a system like we have. But notice that the system we have, even on this pretty dicey scenario, came up with a roughly similar strategy, right? And whenever you can come up with a roughly similar strategy on a regular basis, you're going to be perfectly fine. And the neat thing about studying away from the table is that now you know in this spot, if you were to go back and study the scenario, maybe you want to be betting with your 7s and 6s here. And I think it would be perfectly fine. Notice that would make your marginal made range weaker, and this would essentially add a few more, call it draws. It's not really draws again, it's a hybrid bet. And that would be fine, because in theory we want to have more draws, right? We want to have more draws in this scenario, so an easy way to get more draws is to find them from either the junk, which we really don't want to do because all this junk is really bad, or we want to find them from marginal made hands. And that's going to result in taking hands like pocket 7s and 6s and perhaps betting them as a draw, which is fine, because our ratios are still very in line. So that's how you want to be looking at these scenarios and thinking about them. And I know this was a lot. This was only one flop example, and we're going to go through a bunch more. But I wanted to take it really slowly this time and show you how We are going to be breaking it down using the Poker Coaching Range Analyzer, and also how that compares to the solver and how to make sure you are coming up with roughly the same answer the solver does. By the way, every single answer I gave in these, I made before I looked at the solver. And I wanted to show that just using this method we are using here will give you close enough to what the solver says in the vast majority of scenarios. And like I said, if you come up with the best or the second best play in every scenario you play, you are going to be perfectly fine and you're going to crush your opponents. So let's keep on moving forward.
Sorry. Hang on, one more thing. All right, let's take the test. This is a long, complicated section. Like I said, you're going to have to watch it a couple times, but I really enjoy it. This is the stuff that kind of adds logic to the feelings. So, like, I had similar feelings on when to bet in these scenarios on this particular board, but it was very hard for me to articulate why. This kind of shows me why I think that through experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it makes more sense. When you can see the concrete answers, it kind of reinforces your knowledge and keeps you from making more mistakes. So you're going to make the correct ranges when you understand, or the correct bets on your ranges when you understand why you should be making them. It gives you confidence. It allows you to just go ahead and bet or check and not doubt yourself, which is very important. Okay. When you're the preflop raiser, should you be betting frequently or infrequently on this board? Well, very frequently, because it favors your range. Yes. Let's see. In which situation should you use more big bet sizes, under the gun versus big blind, or button versus big blind? Well, I would say the under the gun, because you're being out of position. Your bet sizes need to be bigger. Yeah, because you're gonna use the bigger bet sizes more frequently, because you're gonna have a stronger range advantage. In which situation should you do the most checking? Under the gun versus big blind, or button versus big blind? Or under the gun versus button. That's the one I was looking for. Yeah, so you're out of position, under the gun versus the button. Yeah. Positional disadvantage. When you develop a checking range, what is the first hand type that should be checking? I mean, marginal made hands, right? When you develop a checking range, what is the first hand type that should be checking? I guess marginal hands is it, right? Yeah. The first hands you should look to check, these are hands that you want to get closer to the showdown without building a pot but have value. Right. So this when your hand's weaker, you're going to want to get to showdown more often with less money in the pot. When your hand is stronger, you want to get more money in the pot before the showdown. Pretty elementary thinking. We're going to mark this as complete. And that was a long section. And this is just another example, and this is going to be another... Well, this one's kind of quick. Maybe we can bang out this one. Hang on. Okay. Yeah, this is a shorter section. Let's go through it.
Now let's discuss King, King, 6. So you raise under the gun +1, big blind calls, flop comes King, King, 6, and the big blind checks. Notice here, same exact pre-flop starting range in this scenario as the previous section in this course. And now we again want to go through and categorize all of our hands. Just do it very naturally, see what you end up with. Premium hands are going to be pocket 7s and better. I think you can very clearly bet 7s and better on the flop and the turn, and maybe even the river against most people in the big blind in this spot. Obviously, kings are premium hands. Marginal hands are going to be stuff like ace high and under pairs, right? And draws are going to be really everything else here. Because if you notice, all of our hands that we've categorized as draws actually have some amount of equity, either backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, whatever. And also, we really are looking hard for draws here. And again, notice this is a scenario where we have loads of marginal hands, loads of premium hands, basically no draws, basically no junk. So that makes it very clear we have a big range and nut advantage here. As you see, looking at the solver, giant equity advantage, right? 66%. So we're going to be betting every time. This is a scenario where even though we have a huge nut advantage, range connectivity is a very important factor. The big blind's range in this spot is going to be very weak. It's going to be a lot of hands like ace high, queen high, jack high, 10 high. And for that reason, you're going to want to bet using a very small size in this scenario. All right, let's say you raise the button and the big blind calls. Again, notice same button range as before, so you can make sure you're using those same ranges. Flop comes king, king, 6. Big blind checks. Again, go through and naturally categorize your hands. We're looking at pocket 7s and better being a nut hand. All the kings. Ace highs again are going to be marginal. I'm going to call all these 6s marginal. Notice I elected to check the king 6 because it's a super nuts. You're going to find that the solver at least sometimes consider checking the super nuts in these scenarios. But whatever. Now, how do we categorize draws and junk here? I think essentially in these scenarios, you're going to pretty much always want to be betting with your lower showdown value hands and betting your lower showdown value hands, checking your higher showdown value hands. So in this scenario, what we have done is we have checked our best queen highs and we have bet everything else. We've also checked the 5-4 because 5-4 does not have overcards to a 6. Notice all these hands here that I'm betting in blue are essentially a draw, a 6-out draw against a 6, right? If you have 10-9 and your opponent has jack 6, you have 6 outs to make the best hand. So this is a weird scenario where on this very, very uncoordinated board, you have to look really hard for draws, and usually you want draws to the most likely hand your opponent's going to check call with, and that's going to be either ace high or a 6, right? So that's why we're betting all these hands in blue. If you wanted to really specify this, you could go in and select all backdoor flush draws to bet and call everything else junk. I think that's also viable. That said, none of this really matters a ton because, again, if you go through and look at this range breakdown, we have too few draws. Remember, we're going to have up to 40% here. And we have too little junk. So we are, again, going to be a scenario where we have a range/nut advantage. And that's going to result in us betting every time. Okay? As you see, again, solver bets 94% of the time. When it bets 94% of the time, just bet every time using a small size. Again, pretty big equity advantage. So that results in us betting very frequently. I know so far all of these have been bet frequently, but we're going to get to somewhere you don't bet frequently soon. All right, let's take a look at another situation. This is when you raise under the gun +1 and the button calls. Flop comes king, king, 6.
Situations like this are also the kind of thing that makes you bet more often when you have a range advantage for the king. So if you're more likely to have the king, you should be betting. All these things, these marginal made hands that bet, these draws that bet, the junk that bets, basically you're going to be betting this flop frequently when you have the range advantage because of the simple fact that it's very hard for your opponent to have a king or to know whether or not you have one. You can throw them off by betting super small all the time and just keep peppering the bets. But a lot of times what I like to do here is bet large when I actually have the king because a lot of players' first thought is no one would bet that large with the nuts. And they will call you. And then if you check the turn, you're going to see them bluff you on the river, and you just end up making, huge wins. And it's really a nice little strategy.
Again, categorize the range. We have really good hands in red. All these hands are very, very strong. Hands in green, marginal made, draws here. Okay. Now, this is a scenario where I do think you should still probably bet with your entire range. I know we've discussed earlier, when you're out of position, you want to be checking the vast majority of the time. But this type of board, king, king, 6, queen, queen, 6, ace, ace, 6, these are so good for under the gun +1 to the point that you have a big range advantage and you have a big nut advantage. And again, look, when we categorize our range, we have way too few draws, right? We could have up to, what, 80%, right? More than a range could even have. We have way too few draws, and we have way too little junk. Now, perhaps we could be a little bit more stringent categorizing our hands. We could take queens, jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s and make them marginal, right? But again, they're not junk, right? And even then, we're still going to have way too many premium hands. So this is a spot where our range advantage is just so big, and our nut advantage is so big to the point that we can just bet very, very frequently. Notice here we actually don't have a giant range advantage like perhaps I was thinking here. But the nut advantage is substantial. Notice the solver opts to check 11% of the time out of position, which, you know, would be way more or way less than the 44% we would at least naturally consider checking in this scenario. And that's, again, just because we have a big nut advantage, given the fact that we have all of the kings. Interestingly enough, the solver does not really slow play a ton in this spot. It does check pocket kings sometimes, I guess, but it's not really doing a whole lot of slow playing. Again, if you look at the hands that are at least considering checking, it's going to be the best marginal made hands typically. It's going to be stuff like aces sometimes, ace high sometimes, middle pairs sometimes, right? Ace X sometimes. But again, this is a spot where you just want to bet everything because we have that big.
It is one of those ones where the best slow play is a fast play. So if you just see this flop come down and then you have the king, just automatically making a robotic, 1/3 pot C bet, just as soon as the board hits, will get called 100% of the time and then set up the opponent to bluff you.
Nut advantage. When you have a big nut advantage, that will impact frequency to some extent, especially when you do have a range advantage as well.
All right, let's go ahead and take the test. You're the pre-flop blazer. Should you be betting frequently or infrequently on this flop? Frequently. You have the range advantage. You have more kings. When you're out of position as the pre-flop raiser on king deuce, should you bet with a small size or a large size? I mean, I'm going to go small size just because you should have this again. So your range is so strong that your bet can be smaller. Would you lose significant EV if you just bet small with your entire range from under the gun +1, whether you're in position or out of position on this board? No, you wouldn't, because you have such a strong range advantage. You can bet this board 100% of the time, and it's going to be plus EV. All right, mark is complete. All right, I think that's good for today. We're going to finish up the next 2 sections of these examples tomorrow. I don't think today's a play day. It might be for cash just a little bit later because I'm playing a lot of cash at night off stream. But I'll stream it if I do that. And I'm just working on the next YouTube content. So I'll see you guys later. There's a few people out there streaming. I'll let you find them. And yeah, have a great day. And I'll see you soon.